you've been sending out a bunch of emails, right? Like, in terms of some activities aligned with like your new Rebecca Courtney start. All right,
Yeah.
like I'm kind of partly I am a little like intrigued. Like, what was it felt like it as well that my assumption is like things are going really well, AJ&Smart, and they still continue to go well. So what was the drive for you to like jump into the I'm going to just go off on my own, make it the Rebecca
Yeah.
show?
So I think I was starting to get the itch about 2 years ago. And especially like Jonathan, the CEO of AJ&Smart is my brother. Um, he's always encouraging this. Like, at AJ&Smart, he's always like, if you want to do your own thing, like I'm fully 100% behind you. And he kind of sees AJ&Smart sometimes as a platform for people to like, go out into their own eventually, which is really cool. And I think it was just spending time around people like Jonathan and Laura, also his fiance. She was also like my boss, which is really funny, and my sister-in-law to be. It's all very really connected. So like, yeah, it was both of them, being around them and seeing that like with them everything is possible. This is kind of addictive and infectious. And so it was a bit of listening to them and seeing what they were giving me this confidence that anything is possible and I can do this on my own. And also a part of my job at AJ&Smart was coaching in this high level program, Workshop or Master. And within those coaching calls, I am helping facilitators build their own careers in facilitation. And so I was giving lots of advice and coaching people to do their own thing and watching them succeed to a point where I was like, I want to do this myself now. I'm seeing other people doing it and I'm seeing that they're successful. I want to try this. I really want to go out and step out on my own and do this as just me. And bring my own thing to this facilitation world. So it's a bit of both things.
Like I struggle with this sometimes because I think about like I work for an organization, but I'm hosting this podcast and there is a little point at which people will reach out specifically and say like, "Well, Phil, what's your advice?" And it's like it's hard to like align myself or try to align yourself with an organization, step aside and say, "Well, also I want a value that I have some value to share." And so there's that kind of push between the individual and the collective mindset of what we're setting up. I'm intrigued, like because I think that when I was first taught about facilitation, I think there was a lot of energy set around the idea that we weren't really a part of the group. We're there just like this invisible entity that guides. And the more I've been doing this, the more I realize that that's just an impossibility. Like it's an
Yeah.
impossibility to assume that we can be void of all influence. Like we're going to share something. Either the language we say, the way we frame, the words we use, like we're going to add influence, and it's hard to ignore that. So it feels like somewhat like when I hear about people going into the solopreneur realm, especially in the facilitating world, I think there's almost like a reevaluation of the value of yourself. Like, is that what you have kind of felt as well? It's like I want to value myself and the influence and the experience you now have cultivated over the last number of years. Maybe
Mm.
that's more accurate.
Yeah, yeah. And also, I think for me, what's happened over the last few years, especially at AJ&Smart, and I know not a lot of people have this like opportunity to figure out what gives you energy, figure out what you don't like, what you do like, and then zone in on that. And I think that's what AJ&Smart gave me this last 5 years of just like it acted almost like a filter to show me what I should be doing and where I provide the most value to people. And it was weird. It was like this full circle moment of like going from being a teacher before I joined AJ&Smart and loving teaching, like really it gave me the most energy. Then going to become a facilitator, being like, wait, what is this? Like a process facilitator, which meant I was going into teams, helping solve their big challenges with them and, being really a part of the outcomes and all of that. And then realizing process facilitation isn't actually the thing that brings me the most joy and where I feel I can bring my most value. And then from there, that made me realize learning facilitation. So, like, actually training people to develop these skills and helping people build careers in facilitation, that's the thing that I feel I'm the best at. So it's like it was one of these like it was a long process for me to get to like, oh, I don't like process facilitation that much. I love teaching people about facilitation. And so now I'm like really like full circle moment gone back to my teaching roots. And that's how I'm putting myself out there now. I'm telling people that I can help individual facilitators build their confidence and skills in this, and I can also train teams in facilitation. So yeah, it's like that process, I suppose, showed me how I can provide value. The process of working at AJ&Smart filtered it all out.
And I think I hope that people listening to this are like, that's a really good developmental plan. Like I often, especially to newer facilitators, tell people they really should experience a myriad different ways to use the skills and the tools of facilitation. If you
Hmm.
my entry was also teaching, and so I worked with a lot of kids. And then when I came to work at the organization I worked at now, I focused mainly on youth programming, and so it was the same thing of like, oh, I'm just going to work with kids. I started then teaching the teachers and then realized like, oh, I actually prefer this because I get excited about like developing educators. So it's exactly that
Hmm.
same, it's that next level up. I also feel for this is just for me, I feel that I can influence more by influencing the people who are influencing groups. So it's like I feel like I'm making bigger difference. But
I love what you
but
just said. That was such a
yeah.
perfect Oh my God. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So I just think like that kind of stuff is the part that now is a realization I had, but it's not for everyone. I have a colleague who went the other way, like was doing a lot of educator training and realized like, actually, I want to work with the kids more. Like, I think like that's the part that brings me joy. So I want to do that. And it's okay either or. It wasn't a like, oh, I think sometimes there feels like development has to be you're getting to whatever, like you keep going up ladders. But I actually think there's just you're figuring out which of the 10 ladders is the right one to climb versus like how to get higher. And so I think that that's what you're sort of suggesting as well. You've created this idea of like, this is the direction I want to go in, and this is my purpose. And maybe I'm not going to get that with AJ&Smart that I wouldn't be able to get if I just started to cultivate my own client base.
Yeah, totally, totally. I love what you just said that you like influencing people who have an influence on others. Like this sentence has really landed for me because that's what I enjoy the most as well. Like it's the thing that gives me the most energy. And with AJ&Smart, there is a lot of process facilitation versus this kind of like going out and teaching and training people on facilitate the type of facilitation that I also want to teach, which is more around play, more around connection and building meaning and designing incredible experiences. And like also that world of education is I'm looking into that space as well, keeping an eye on that and seeing what I can do there. So yeah, I just felt within the confines of AJ&Smart, I couldn't just explore all of that myself. So now I'm very excited that I have that freedom to just like figure it out as I go.
Let's go into the because you just referenced like the play part, and this is something I did write down.
Uh-huh.
So maybe I'll come back to this, but the lead in would be right. You have started out on your own. You posted on LinkedIn. You're starting out on your own, and you had like a newsletter sign up thing. And the
Yeah.
newsletter sign up was for multi-day. You were sharing, I think it was 7 days or 6 days of like activities. The You wrote in there in one of them about the idea that adults have forgotten how to play, and it's something that you have experienced that maybe like adults have forgotten how to play. I'm always a big part of that too. I've got a light behind me that says play. I'm always like, how do I create the best for adults to have more play based learning? This is the question I have for you though, based on this. How do you get past the eye rolls? Because as I even read your emails, and I will admit, I have some of this like still centered cringe sometimes to the idea of play, even though I'm a play based learner. So I read like zombies or I read like Fourth Little Pig, and I'm like, oh, do I really want it? And then I read it and I'm like, oh, okay, the activity is like a good activities. But I can anticipate there's so much pushback from a client perspective of seriousness to play and like so I'm intrigued like how do you get past that because you've probably got a larger experience of working more adult corporate also, so what's
Yeah.
your thoughts on play?
So, yeah, this is such a good question, and I could talk about it forever. But I think for me, it took me a while to allow that playful side of myself to come into this new space of facilitation and working with adults. I used to be obsessed with it as a teacher. It used to be just my core thing, making learning playful. And I did actually my dissertation on play-based learning, which is so funny, the full circle. It's wild. It always comes back. And so then I just within AJ and Smart, I just started testing activities like with low stakes things with the team first at AJ and Smart. And then when we'd do meetups and things like that with people from our programs, I would just like bring in an activity and see how people responded. And every activity I was bringing in, people were just like lighting up. And I also felt like my energy and passion behind the activity also made them buy into it more too. So I feel like it really depends on the facilitator's passion for the activity, which can make it successful. And then I started to go into bigger rooms, more serious rooms with like senior leaders. And I remember the first time I really felt this like inner worry was when I was with a group of like 60 senior leaders, like at a really big company. And I was like, I want to do the rock, paper, scissors tournament with them. But like, this is dodgy because they were already annoyed about being there. You know, they were just like, oh,
Yeah.
they were so busy, and I was just like, how am I going to do this? And I just pushed past it. I felt the feeling of like, this is horrible. I know that they don't want to do it, but I just pushed past it, used my energy and excitement to like rally them together and get them into the mood and just did it. And after that exercise, they were all like high-fiving, like laughing, like really accessed their inner child within seconds. And it was from that moment that I was like, okay, this is universal now. If I can get a group as serious as this to loosen up and like of course, even afterwards, their ideas were flowing way better as well because they were in this play mode. If I can do that, I can do it with any group, and I'm going to do it with every group now from now on. And so now in every group I facilitate, I have playful exercises like sprinkled in so that I can unlock that playful, creative side of people, which needs to be accessed and unlocked so that they can come up with the best ideas. So yeah, I pushed through
Yeah.
that, pushed through the pain.
Yeah. Push through the pain. I think that I did a workshop. I used to do a workshop called where actually this one never ran. I put this out and I was going to do this workshop called Caution Adults at Play because I saw a very funny sign that was like, you know, like look, instead of Caution Kids at Play, it was like Caution Adults at Play, and I bought it. Wish I could figure out where I put it. I'll find it for you and I'll maybe send you a photo.
Do
But so I thought, oh, this would be a really cool workshop. The problem I didn't anticipate is that no one was going to purchase, or no one, well, very infrequently, people are going to willing to spend some PD money because I mainly work with educators to send their staff to a workshop that said caution adults at play. So however, what I did was I didn't change the curriculum or the design. All I did was change the workshop title to the power of play, and I talked about like the scientific benefits. I felt like I had to find a another reason to encourage the play because the play alone wouldn't have encouraged it. When you're
Okay.
framing like an activity like a play-based activity, do you do anything at the front of saying you're going to do it to kind of reinforce the importance of it? Or do you just go in like cold and just then talk about it after? Like, what's your choice on the introduction to play?
Yeah, I literally just get them to do it, invite them into the activity, and then afterwards I do a reflection on how it felt and how they're feeling afterwards. And like my question that I always ask, actually, Chad Littlefield inspired as well, mutual friend of ours, is what did you notice going through that activity? And then the realizations, the insights come out of them just talking about, oh, I just felt like really stressed about, like, let's say this fourth little pig's house activity. This is so good to do with adults, by the way, because you see the stress when they enter it first, because a lot of people, a lot of adults, when they're asked to do something playful or design like a house for example here, they go into planning mode and they're just like planning how to do it, what's the best way to build this house, like how is it going to be the sturdiest it'll ever be, and then they don't have enough time to actually build it. And yeah, so I feel like you just have to just push them into this activity for them to realize that they need to loosen up to get into this playful headspace so that they actually can access their best thinking. So yeah, just get them to do it and have the reflection afterwards. And then that is easier to convince them of the power of play in that reflection piece after. They're
Yeah, no,
always a
and
bit like,
mm. Yeah, it's always like you want to do almost like a "told you so" at the end, and that's how you end.
yeah,
It's like, "See, I told you." But like, I do think that what you're suggesting is accurate. Like, I I've even got to a point where I've stopped using the names of of activities. I don't with my clients. I don't even say like, "Hey, we're going to play this. We're going to do this thing." It's just I love the word you said, invitation. Typically, I'll say something like, "Hey, do you want to try something with me?" Because I think like that invites the same kind of, let's try this together. It also implies that it's like uniquely specific to them versus it being like something you do all the time. So I think like that's helpful. And then the reflecting afterwards, because what I used to do, and I kind of think back on my own, like I used to over explain why I might want to do something with a hesitant group because I felt like I needed to, versus like let's just give it a go, and if it flops, it's okay. But like I think I have to just do it because if I talk myself too much around it, then I've talked out of it anyway. Like you get too
yeah.
much.
Yeah, totally. If you try to explain the thing beforehand, well, in my opinion, they just, I don't know, I don't feel like you can get their buy-in as well as just pushing them into the activity. Obviously, like I don't want to force everyone to take part in something that they don't want to, but I invite everybody into it. I frame it as something we're going to do together as an experiment. Like I actually use the this word experiment, and let's just see how it goes. Let's get together. And then I get people moving straight away. I'm like, okay, like just like not even get them to have a chance to think about what they're about to do and just get them into it. And I'm also the same as you. I don't name any of the exercises. The only one I name is the rock, paper, scissors one, because that's like obviously a
Yeah,
universally known game. And when they hear it, they're like, okay, the familiarity is actually good for them to get in.
yeah. We've talked a little bit around this fourth little pig. I wonder if you could share that activity, like what it is, so people might listen to it
Yeah.
and be able to use it.
Yeah,
Because
oh my
otherwise,
God,
they're like, "What on earth are
yeah,
we
they're like,
talking
well, what
about?"
the hell is that? Yeah, totally. So basically it came from when I was a teacher, school teacher, I did it with the kids, and it was always such a hit, and I was always so jealous myself when I watched the kids take part in it. I was like, oh my God, this looks so fun. So I knew when I became a facilitator I had to try it. So basically what it is that you are telling a team that they're going to become architects and that they're going to be building a house for the fourth little pig from the story, The Three Little Pigs. The fourth little pig, unfortunately, was forgotten about in the story and he had no house. So you and your team are going to build this fourth house for them. And the intention behind the whole activity is that you're getting a team to play and think creatively and think outside of the box to create a house. And so each team has the exact same amount of materials. That's really important so that it's fair. Everyone is given the same amount of materials. The materials being like what I normally use is a sheet of tinfoil for each team. They'd all have the same thing, some paper, just like normal A4 paper, some card, some string. What else do I use? Some Lego blocks, maybe 5 pieces of Lego, just a few bits and pieces. And basically, each team then is given 20 minutes to build a sturdy enough house that is going to be able to withstand the wolf's wind. And the wind, meaning you as the facilitator have to bring a hair dryer, and that will emulate the wind. And so then after the 20 minutes, when everyone has built their house, they're optimizing for sturdiness. They can't tape their house to the table or anything. It has to just be heavy enough to stay on a table. You bring all of the houses to a table, or one little space where you can test their sturdiness. And you, as the facilitator, then just place the hairdryer in front of the house and blow on it. And if your house stays in one place and doesn't fly off the table, then you're the winning team. But if your house moves a lot and flies off the table, then you're the losing team. And it's such an incredible activity that just gets everybody collaborating. It's a brilliant icebreaker if you want a team to just like get straight into talking to each other and planning. It's also a really great one to highlight how group dynamics emerge and evolve in a group. And so in that reflection piece afterwards, you can be like, did anybody like naturally take the lead? Did anybody feel like their ideas weren't being listened to? So it's a brilliant activity to get people to play, but also get people to understand how collaboration works. So yeah, it's brilliant. So fun.
And also a side benefit for facilitators, you get to destroy something potentially, which is very fun. Like
Oh my God,
that's got to be the most enjoyable.
that moment with the hairdryer. I will say that you as the
Yeah,
facilitator, something comes over you.
yeah, exactly. That's what I mean.
It's
I
brilliant.
often tell people like you've got to have stuff in your agenda that's also going to keep you entertained. And so
Yeah,
sometimes when you do an activity that brings you some level of joy like that, that's really helpful.
you have to do it. Yeah,
You
totally.
have to do
And
it.
it's also it's the perfect activity. It's kind of like the marshmallow challenge that's
Yeah, yeah.
out there. Um, I'm not sure who did the TED talk around that challenge, but basically that challenge was done with as an experiment with a group of children and a group of adults. And the children who took part in that challenge beat the adults like tenfold. And this is really good also to talk about as part of this Little Pig activity. You can talk about the fact that if children were here doing this, that their houses, their bills would be way better than the adults because they don't plan. They just pick up the materials and they test them and they try to build something. And if it doesn't work, they just try again. So their children are way, way better at just using the materials, testing, iterating, trying again. Whereas adults are more focused on planning, spending lots of time talking about what they should do rather than actually doing it. And so it's a really fun experiment to show adults as well that like we need to tap into our inner child and be more playful in order for our creativity to be actually enhanced.
Yeah, it's so often like when you work with adults in any form of problem solving, their fear of failure can be such an overwhelm that you just didn't get into analysis paralysis, and it's just like
Yeah.
you are just stuck thinking of like, oh, how do I succeed? Where a kid isn't really thinking in that way. They're just like, how do we make this fun?
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
actually, actually realized this at one point. I was working with some students, and I can't remember the exact activity, but I'd created too many parameters. Used to do a workshop called "Being Intentionally Vague," which like now I'm of this mindset of like, yeah, give less because then that allows less less walls of a box means that they can probably think outside of it. If you create too much thick walls, then they can't get out of it anyway. And I think a kid said to me at one point, he said, after I'd said the rules, he went, Phil, you just made that so unfun. And I was
Oh my
like,
God.
oh, but that's a good, you sanitize to a point where you've taken any of the fun out of something by like adding.
Yeah.
And the reason I'd done that is because previous groups that I'd worked with had found out like loopholes around stuff and like figured out ways to trick, and then I realized it's okay. It's okay if they come up with an idea that somewhat defeats my purpose, because
Hmm.
then the purpose is like what they create, and I get to talk about that more. So it's like, I think sometimes facilitators, we get stuck on the things. Have you ever
So true.
run into that maybe where you've like not brought the right materials or something and had to check? Like I think about that with product, with like bringing
Mm.
props, where you as a facilitator have had to be more playful because we ask it of others.
Yeah. Let me just think. I imagine there's like a billion scenarios. I'm just trying to think of a good one to share. Yeah, actually, this happened recently at a facilitation training where I had like a way of organizing people into their tables. I'm not sure that might have said this on the last podcast, but basically I had this system of like stickers. And so each table was a specific color. And then when people came into the room, I'd have all these stickers cut up and they'd pick a sticker and they'd go to the matching table. And then I realized when I went to went to the room, the stickers weren't there. And I was like, oh God, what am I going to do? And I think like the time pressure, because people were coming in 5 minutes, that time pressure forced me to be creative, which is also amazing with any creative, playful exercise. When you put time limits on them, that actually allows people access creativity that they normally can't. So that time pressure made me just go, I have Lego. So instead of stickers, I'm just going to have a blue Lego table, a red one, a yellow one, blah, 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 and put all of these Lego pieces into a bowl, and they can just pick a Lego block and find their matching table. And that was way better than my original strategy. Like my
Yeah.
dot stickers that I had, the Lego was way better because it became this collaborative, beautiful thing that when people went to their table, they all started building their own tower together as a table. And yeah, so it was just one of those moments where I had to think playfully and it actually worked really well.
I was thinking of one as you were like anxious if I had one, and
Yeah.
I don't know why this one popped into my head, but I went to a I was presenting at a conference. You know, I don't know if you've probably experienced this, where you end up going to a location and the room space is not exactly as you identified, or at least
Yep.
things are just not the right. I ended up in a room that had 4 or 5 pillars, like, in the middle of the room, like, so I could, even though the chairs were set around the outside, like I had a full circle, but, like, I
Mm.
couldn't sight lines were destroyed by these pillars that were all in the middle
Yeah.
of this room. It's a terrible design of a room space. And I was like, "Oh, no, how am I" had a lot of activities that involved, like, large circles and eye contact, and I couldn't think of what to do, and I randomly, had some reflection cards, like questions written down of like various different prompts of like, what did you see that was successful, like those kind of things. And so I laid them around the pillars and I invited them to do an activity I ended up calling pillar talk because of pillow talk, the play on pillow talk. And I was like, all right, head over, grab a card from the pillar and find someone and have a moment of pillar talk. And it created a lot of like giggles as well because I was calling it pillar talk. That for me was like a mic drop moment. I've like the energy already just from me just thinking a little bit playfully, and like instead of fighting against the pillars, I decided to make them something, which was that's the I think it's similar aligned with like you don't have something and you have to make something else. But, like,
Oh my gosh,
anytime,
that's
like,
amazing.
I think yeah, so if you ever have a pillar in your room, you can do pillar talk, I guess, and you'll have a giggle at least,
No, I love
with
that. I
people.
really love that. But also maybe you felt this as well. And this is something I'm trying to like harness in a way that's, I don't know, like successfully harness this creativity that's like that emerges when you're under major pressure. And so like it's weird for me. It's like I feel like with everything, when I have real time limits, when I'm under like major pressure, I'm able to access this level of creativity that I normally can't do day to day. So it's weird. I'm trying to figure out how to lean into that in a way that's like not completely destructive. So like a way of that I'm trying to do this is I have a talk coming up in May, and normally for something like that where I'm publicly speaking about a topic, which I don't do often, I'd plan everything ahead. You know, I'd be like, oh, I know what I'm saying, and I'm going to try go into it a little bit blind. I know my topic, I know what I want to talk about, and so what I'm going to try to do is just have like as little slides as possible with as little content on as possible and try to make it a bit more emergent and interact with the
Mhm.
audience so that they can almost co-create my talk with me. But yeah, I'm trying to figure out is that the best I want to try access this creativity that I know is in there in a way that isn't terrifying. For
Well,
like yeah.
that's the balance. I do think, like, most of the stuff that I've come up with that was the better was just off the top of my head.
Mm,
Maybe it's like a,
yeah.
facilitate a flow state where it's like
Yes.
you're at the you have, like, maximized, like, "Oh, I've done this enough that I could tap into my facilitator flow." And,
Yeah.
yeah, you come up with stuff that's better. I've also I wonder if you've done this 'cause I acknowledged it at one point in a workshop. I've done enough conference workshops now that sometimes I can just tap into that. I was talking with a group and I was explaining something and then I realized it was like how when you drive sometimes to a location and you get to the end and you forget how you got there. I had said a load and I had no idea what I'd said. Like I got
Oh
to
my
the end and
gosh.
was like, "Oh no." And I had this like worry, but I looked around the group and I realized like there was a lot of head nodding. I was like, I must have said something good. And I honestly don't know what I said. So maybe that's the downside of facilitator flow is like you could get to a point where you just end up rambling. You don't know what you're talking about. and you just
Maybe you're
pray it's
not
good.
rambling. Maybe it's just that it's so innately within you now that it's coming out and like people are
Yeah,
yeah, maybe that is just the level that we're all trying to get to. I
maybe
love
that's
this
it.
metaphor of like
Yeah.
the flow state of just driving the car, that feeling. I totally get it. It's happened a few times when I explain exercises. I'm like, they're all doing something. What did I just say?
Yeah, did I explain all of it? Yeah, you just get into like this, "Okay, here we go." Uh,
Yeah,
the
totally.
last thing, and this is actually relevant because we're getting to the end of our time on this, but you talked about how to close, and I thought that this was, really important because I think there's an episode, maybe I'm gonna have to redo it, early on in the podcast. I remember I did how to begin a workshop, how to close one. You'd referenced the idea of, like, any other thoughts or any further thoughts or any like adding like anything not ending in a way that actually feels good, but like kind of rushing the end. Like
Mhm.
what's your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are please never say any final thoughts at the end of a workshop.
There we go.
And
Yeah.
instead, yeah, I have this rule of like leave at least 15 minutes in the end of your agenda to intentionally close a session with the group. Even if you feel like it might like eat into your content time, it doesn't matter. Even if you're not finished a workshop exercise, just cut it and leave that 15 minutes at the end to either reflect intentionally with a group of just like what happened, what did you learn, what next steps are you going to take, or another way of reflecting is ending on a note of gratitude. So just a way of actually closing where people will remember this certain feeling of like it's wrapped up neatly in a nice bow and it's not just like, oh, what the hell was that? And moving on to their next thing. That's my nightmare.
Yeah. And I'm gonna add, so Rebecca's is no, don't say any final thoughts. Mine is if you're a facilitator, don't say if we had more time I would have.
Yes.
That honestly is my giant pet peeve because people don't know what you were going to do anyway, and you saying,
Hmm.
"If we had more time, I would have," and then fill in the blank means that you did not plan. Like,
Yeah,
you've just acknowledged to
totally.
the group you did not time manage. And so why would you end with, like, this, like, "Oh, by the way, this was all great, and yes, I messed up."
Yeah, yeah.
It's
But I
incredible how
wanted to
many
do
times I
this.
hear that. Yeah.
Yeah,
"Oh, we could
yeah,
have done this really good thing." We're like, "Why didn't you do that then?" Like that
yeah,
kind ending like those, yeah, it's just such a terrible floppy way of ending. So, all right.
yeah.
There we go.
Intentionally close.
We've ended by saying don't end those ways. So I'm going to end by asking if you have any final thoughts. All right. Thank you, Rebecca.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Phil, for
Oh,
having me on.
no, before we end, don't. No, I don't want to end there. I want to end by asking if people want to find out more about you, Rebecca. Like, is that newsletter
Oh yeah.
thing still? What are the next steps for you and the Rebecca Courtney? And how do people get in touch?
Well, if people want to check out my LinkedIn, I post a lot of content there. I'm always there. That's where I'm consistently showing up. If you want to be part of this, it's a 7-day email series essentially, where it's like a 7-day toolkit of all of my favorite activities, which are like icebreakers, connection activities, energizers, all of my favorite ones that I always use on repeat with big groups and small groups. They work with every group. You can go to rebeccacourtney.com to sign up for that. And yeah, you can check that out. That's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Rebecca. I'm going to end better because I'm going to end with a little bit of gratitude. So, gratitude to you for being willing to join me again. And I always enjoy these conversations. So, the more we can do this, maybe even not have to record it, but the more we can do this, the better for me. So, thank you, Rebecca.
Definitely. Same. Thank you so much for having me on.